Good evening, my fellow exorcists, and welcome to the Lair of the Film Exorcist. Tonight we will be taking a look at Braveheart, a Mel Gibson film. William Wallace is the medieval Scottish patriot who is spurred into revolution against the English when the love of his life is slaughtered. Leading his army into battles that become a war, his advance into England threatens King Edward I's throne before he is captured and executed, but not before becoming a symbol for a free Scotland. Let's move on to my opinion. Okay, so after a while of doing some research, I have to say this movie is a terrible historical film. The timeline is completely off because William Wallace actually attacked the English long before he became Guardian of Scotland. He was never a farmer. He was the son of a nobleman who became a thief and soon after took up the fight for Scottish independence, while Wallace and King Robert the Bruce both fought for Scottish independence. There is no record of them ever fighting against each other or alongside each other. It's also said that King Robert the Bruce actually did switch sides multiple times during the war, but it's also not said that he was at the Battle of Stirling Bridge. That's what I'm thinking of. Also, if you don't notice, in this movie there is no Stirling Bridge. They just call it a Battle of Stirling Bridge, but there is no bridge, which is very inaccurate. Actually, the only thing this movie really gets right or close to right is William Wallace's death, which does involve Wallace being hung until close to death, and after having his entrails cut out, and then he was beheaded. What the movie doesn't show is Wallace's genitals being cut off and his bowels being burned in front of him. Also, him being drawn and quartered and being dragged before being executed. And actually, Randall Wallace wasn't wrong when he stated in the movie that Sir William Wallace's body was cut to pieces and sent to the four corners of Great Britain, and his head sat on a pike on top of London Bridge. This was at least true, technically. Let's also face it, this movie does Robert the Bruce a disservice, making him a bit of a coward despite being known as one of Scotland's greatest heroes, who brought independence to Scotland during his time as both its guardian and king. Not to mention, this movie did also seem like an attack on King Edward I and King Edward II, both of whom refused to give the Scots their independence, but also this movie does Edward I perfectly, because as history shows, he was a pretty cruel man due to being a part of 2 crusades and many other wars. What the movie doesn't show is that the people of Scotland actually asked King Edward to come to Scotland to mediate as to make sure Scotland didn't fall into a civil war due to the death of King Alexander III, which left Scotland without a king. It's actually well known in history that King Edward I was a very charitable man who did care about the citizens and did give money to those who were poor and did try his best to help, despite not wanting to give them the independence that they wanted. There was also no prima nocta. That is possibly an idea that the French came up with, but it never happened in England. It was never practiced on the Scots or the Irish or anyone in the United Kingdom, so that, I believe that was just an idea that the writers came up with just to make it more dramatic, and I mean, yeah, that's kind of a problem. To be honest, there is no official record of William Wallace's life, which does make it pretty hard to write a movie about one of Scotland's heroes, but still, this movie does too much to romanticize Sir William Wallace, and from a historian's point of view, this movie is a joke and a huge problem. Now, from a director's point of view, this is a brilliant movie that does its best to constantly keep your attention. Despite its major historical problems, this movie is still really enjoyable to watch, especially with how big the battles are. I mean, I love seeing two armies go at it on a grassy plain, destroying each other as if they're nothing. I mean, to me, this is just another interesting war film, similar to Mel Gibson's The Patriot or 300, or this is heavily inaccurate like most war films. I mean, it's very similar to also Saving Private Ryan, which does show the storming of the beaches of Normandy, but it's also, a lot of it is inaccurate and might not have actually happened in real life. And let's be honest, this was made more as a entertaining film from the minds of Randall Wallace and Mel Gibson. I mean, even they said that they didn't really care about the historical accuracy. They went off of feelings for this movie. They felt that this would be better to watch, better for an audience to enjoy, instead of making it actually accurate, because they assumed it would have been boring. And I did get a lot of hate from both the Scottish and the English and many Scottish descendants, because this does do a huge disservice to Robert the Bruce and William Wallace. I do enjoy watching it for the story, again, despite it being really inaccurate to the real life events, and this movie did make me want to actually do some research on the history of Scotland, especially since my father's side of the family does partially come from Scotland. I mean, I am part Scottish and Welsh and Irish. I'd even go as far to say that the romance at the beginning of the movie was interesting to watch, despite how short it was, and despite it being more of an element of the poem that the writers went off of more on. But it's an okay film. I mean, again, the historical inaccuracy does annoy me, but it is a good popcorn film to watch when you just want to hang out with someone or just watch something somewhat interesting. Especially if you're into war and big scaled battles. So let's get on to my film score, which to be honest is a lot lower than I thought after all the research I did and after watching the YouTube channel History Buffs, who actually does a lot of videos on the historical accuracy of movies and TV shows, and he's really good. I just figured I'd give him a shout out because he did open my eyes more on the history of William Wallace and other movies and how different this is compared to what it should have been. I'm sorry to say that I'm giving this movie a 5.5 out of 10 for both being a very inaccurate historical movie, but also because it's a very enjoyable war movie that takes place in a time period that is very rarely spoken of. I mean, at least this film didn't take place during World War II like many other war films. But yeah, while this movie is annoyingly historically inaccurate, it's still a good popcorn film that I do plan to come back to many other times. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and click the little notification bell for more of our videos. And maybe YouTube will finally give us our freedom from the 315 mark of subscribers. But have a great night, guys, and remember, freedom!